So Ted, I know you have daughters, and I know that children have a funny way of teaching their parents in a number of ways. How do your daughters impact you as a communicator? How do they sort of sharpen those communication skills? And conversely, by the way, so it's sort of a two-part question. Your T-shirt says "Be good to people." In this sort of day and age where we have world leaders, even leaders in our own country at the very, very highest office, that may not necessarily exercise that moniker of "be good to people," how do you teach your daughters that, good guys don't finish last, let's say?
Well, first of all, anybody who knows me or follows me or just Googles me knows that I have a lot of challenges with my daughter. My ex-wife caused a lot of issues. Took my daughters away. I had to fight to keep them in my life. I share this because it's part of my brand. I have a hashtag called "This Dad Won't Quit." She's an alienator, and it became very serious. It's documented, so I'm not just some guy complaining about his ex-wife. And so number one, that, and then number two, just being a divorced dad in general, or divorced parents, your kids aren't with you all the time. Mm-hmm. So you don't, especially as a dad, my divorce was kind of the traditional settlement where I had my children every other weekend and one night during the week. So you're not coming home to them every night. You don't have that ability to look at them before they go to bed and say, you didn't tell me this, or I need to know something. So we tend to reach out to them a little bit more, and I'm sure everybody in this audience that had this happen. So like every other communicator, I always preferred to communicate the way I prefer to communicate. And what do? I'm calling my daughters all the time. Mm-hmm. And either they wouldn't answer, or 2 seconds after I called them, I get a text that said, "What?" exclamation point. Ooh. Right? I'm sure
familiar.
If your kids aren't old enough yet, they will be, and you'll be getting that. And everybody, when I'm in front of an audience of 5,000 people, every head is nodding. And what they're telling you is they're saying, I will not communicate that way. That is not my mode of communication. Mm-hmm. You need to text me, and then I will answer you. Mm-hmm. So I got the message very quickly with my daughters because I desperately wanted some kind of connection. I desperately wanted to hear from them, know what was going on with them. And I also got used to, the Ks and all the short answers and the letters that, represent different things. And I had to thank God for Google because I could always find out what something meant. But the lesson it really taught me that I took into business and my personal life is you need to communicate the way people that you're seeking want to communicate. So let's take it back to one of Abe's first questions about salespeople. So if you're a salesman, that means your goal is to sell something to the person opposite you. Therefore, you are on the line. Therefore, you must learn to communicate the way they want to communicate. Whereas if someone's trying to buy you, or someone wants something from you, so if you reach out to me and say, hey, Ted, on LinkedIn, I really need to talk to you. I have this great opportunity. I need a little help with something. Very often, I will immediately write back and say, please email this to me at tedrubin@gmail.com. And I would say a good 70% of the people just keep communicating with me on LinkedIn. And even when the third message says, if you keep this up here, you are not going to get the result you're looking for because this is not where I follow up. It's too hard for me. And one of the things, because I'm so hard on myself, I hate when I don't follow up. I hate when I forget to get back to somebody. So I try to push them to where is best for me. Or if you need me immediately, I tell people, text me. If you have something you want me to follow up on, send it via email. If you really need me, I actually answer my phone. You don't get one of those voicemails saying the voicemail is full and get put off. And I explain this to people. And then I say to them, now that you're trying to sell me, you need to do it the way I want to do it, just like I have to do it the way you want to do it. I'm in plenty of quote unquote selling situations. It might be more convincing. It might be more, I'm trying to have an influence on somebody. So just like your kids, I want to influence my kids. They don't want me to influence them. Therefore, it's my job to speak to them in a way and a format that works best for them. And I think in the business community, people overlook this so dramatically. I'm sure you guys get this all the time. People keep reaching out to you in a way that doesn't work for you. Now, sometimes it's not their fault because you don't share with them. And then if they're really good, they get proactive. And if they're smart, they try different means of communication. Like I have certain people I know, the only way I can get them is on LinkedIn. Like you'd think that would be counterintuitive. You think they check their business email, their phones, I can text them. No, the only way I get an answer from certain high-level executives is because they periodically look at that and they look for names that are important to them, whatever the reason. But you need in business, so I learned that from my daughters. Absolutely, it started with them. And then another really important thing I learned with my daughters, and unfortunately I can't demonstrate this as well as I do on stage very often, so I'm going to have to share it a little bit more descriptively. But I'm a divorced dad, and when I first got divorced, I had what I call the divorced dad car. And it's the convertible with the seats too close together in the back with no divider. And I had two little girls. They were 5 and 7 at the time. If you have daughters or even boys, you know what it's like, the pushing, the knitting, the pinching. She's staring at me, Daddy. My personal favorite is my daughter used to sniff. My younger one used to sniff my older one. And my older daughter would say, Daddy, she's smelling me. And my little one would snort just to annoy her a little bit more. Now, I'm sitting in the front seat of this car, pulling out what little hair I had left in my head, thinking, what do I do? And this was such a great learning experience because I used to take them to the park all the time. And I started thinking, like, they fight in the park, but they don't. Like, I end it. How do I do that? I grab them by the hand. If I had a camera of the whole deck here, and I skip. And what I usually do on stage is I skip across the stage, which usually, gets everybody to erupt a bit because I'm a very freelance skipper. And I learned that nobody can be unhappy when they're skipping. It's a physical thing in your body. It's genetic. If you skip, you smile, and you're happy. So first, I'm going to give a tip to your audience. If you're ever having a bad day, get up from your desk, especially if you're in front of people, and skip. I promise it'll make you feel better, but more importantly, if it doesn't make you feel better, it'll make everybody around you feel better. But to take this to where I learned this about business is if you can make your vendors, your employees, your customers, your employees, your boss, everybody around you, your friends and family, metaphorically skip with every interaction, you will win. Those are the most two important lessons I learned from my daughters. As far as the last thing you said about how do I impress upon them things, I set an example. My dad was amazing, but one of his lines that I decided, as a kid, you guys probably all had this, the things you say, I'll never do that to my kids.
Yeah.
Some of them you do, but some of them you don't. Well, the one I said I'd never do is my dad used to always say to me, do like I say, not like I do. So whenever he broke a rule, whenever he did something he shouldn't do, whenever he crossed the street the way I'm not supposed to, he'd say, do like I say, not like I do. Well, I worked desperately to teach my daughters to do like I do. And I would, even when I taught my daughters how to drive, I changed my driving because I don't want my daughters seeing, we have a certain amount of experience, many, many years. I can hit the gas, know a car's coming, know I'm going to pass it. I didn't do that in front of my daughters. And that was really hard. And, I'm a New Yorker. I have times where I can go off on somebody, where I can get upset. But look, I do this with social. I have my phone. And before I ever send anything, before I click send, just for a split second, I read it again. Sure. I stop for a second. Because sometimes I know I'm sending something that I shouldn't be sending. And luckily it doesn't happen often, but it does. And that doesn't mean things don't slip through the cracks. But I always did that in front of my daughters. And by the way, even today, when I think about things I'm posting, my daughters don't communicate with me a lot. They swear they don't look at my social media. I know they do. Because I know I know that they don't really watch it every day, but every once in a while they'll check because my younger daughter tends to know things she shouldn't know. Like I tell her I'm going to Thailand and she'll say, I know. And I'm like, how do you know? And she'll go like, you told me. I'm like, no, I didn't. And then I let it go because I also don't want to stop that. And by the way, that's the same thing with business people. Don't say to people, oh, I know you're looking. I know you're paying attention, but make you know. Just allow them to do it. Because if you call them out, it's a very good bet they might stop. But if you don't, just like people use Return on Relationship, they quote me, they use my books without my name all the time, and people reach out and go, oh, this guy did that. I go, hey, I'm just glad they're sharing what I want people to adopt.
Yeah.
And in the end, if you do your job, whether it's branding, whether it's writing books, whether it's posting on social media, people will accrue that value to what you've done. Because there's nobody out there, and there's a lot of people using Return on Relationship in different ways. There's nobody that doesn't bring it back to me at this point.
Hey, Ted, you remind me a little bit about Abraham Lincoln, right? So Abe would send write scathing letters to his generals or to his cabinet, but he wouldn't send them, right? He really, like you said, he would reread it, put it in his desk, or not send the tweet, not post it. But it kind of reminds me of like maybe just the exercise of writing it once was good enough. He doesn't really have to send it out.
I'm gonna throw out another free tip just to your audience and to the communications people out there. Anytime I'm gonna write something new, and by the way, it can be a beautiful idea, but if it's new or if it's controversial, the first place I always put it is Twitter. Because Twitter's like a river. It flows very quickly. Yes, those tweets last forever, but someone's only going to find that if they research it. But it goes by quick. So if you write something that isn't exactly what you wanted to say, or maybe somebody's insulted by it, and that was not your intention. If that was your intention, then you accomplished your goal. But if it wasn't your intention, I used Twitter to modify my thinking. So when I first did Return Relationship, when almost every one of the things you'll hear from me here, they first went out on Twitter, and I also look because you get immediate feedback. People come right back to either you see likes or people write back and disagree or agree with you. And then I modify those initial thoughts there before I bring them to what I call more static environments, like LinkedIn, Facebook, or then onto my blog where it's really more static and it's a place I can warehouse it and own it forever. And that's another tip. Especially if you're in the communications business, have a place where you keep stuff that's yours, that nobody can take away, that Mark Zuckerberg can't wake up one day and say, you know what, had enough, I'm closing Facebook. I said you could keep your content? You can't. Sue me. You know, everything goes into my blog, and I own that. That's my property. And that way, all of my thinking, all of my things are somewhere where I'll always be able to access them in the future.
That's interesting. So I want to go back to your daughters just one more time before we move on. And I found, again, a couple of points you made pretty interesting. So I think one of the issues right now with the millennial generation is that there is an overwhelming feeling of them being very transactional, right? There's no sort of gray or middle ground. Again, it's a 1 + 1 = 2 situation. How do you impress upon your daughters going into the business world? And again, I don't know, can you offer their ages? Would that be okay?
24 and 26.
Oh, so they're a little bit older. Okay.
My younger daughter is in her senior year at Harvard Law School, and my older daughter graduated Columbia with a master's and is now teaching art in an elementary school.
Wow, so
very proud papa.
But this is a great example. So they're very, very accomplished, correct? Again, you've already impressed this upon them. But let's say for maybe a younger generation getting into the hiring in the business world in the next 3-4 years, how do you impress upon that generation that being transactional is not conducive to them being successful? And by the way, if you would disagree with that, disagree. But
no, I agree. But what I'll tell you is, and look, I think we've all learned this. I know I learned this lesson from me personally. The more we try to impress upon them with what we think is important, very often the less they'll do it. So I'm going to step back 1 second to what I said about setting an example. And I also have learned, my dad had a great practice, was he, instead of calling me and lecturing to me later on when I got to that point, or even when I was in high school, is he'd leave things for me. I'd come home from college, there'd be a series of articles sitting on my night table. He knew in college I probably didn't look at the envelopes he mailed me because I figured there were things, money I owed him in them or something whenever I might do something he wasn't happy with. But once I graduated, I would get articles folded up. I think a lot of us have gotten that. I think a lot of dads do that. But I think a lot of it is learning how not to lecture, how to have a conversation. I think that's a skill we have to learn, because I don't know, I think it's something automatic. As you get older, you start lecturing. Is that something that's ingrained in our genetics? I'm not sure, but I think that setting an example, I also think that, and this goes to what we're going to talk about in the end, you know, we learn as we grow. I mean, look, we've all heard this expression all our lives growing up, and we hated it when we were young. Life is wasted on the young. Now that I'm 63, I'm like, I wish, you know, I had some of the wherewithal, the experience. And one of the things I tell people is that I believe that boomers are the best at social media. And I don't mean with the tools, because we're hardly the best with the tools. But the reason we're the best is because we understand relationships the best. Why do we understand relationships the best? Because we've been doing them for 50 damn years. The experience teaches so much. So what I would say is encourage your kids to experience things, to try things. Don't talk them out of things because they're not good at it. You know, there are a lot of gurus out there now, and I'm sure you'll all know who I'm talking about specifically, who tell everybody to only do what they're best at. And don't get a regular job, just be an entrepreneur, and that's what you got to do. And tell your parent, you know, he's actually been modifying his message lately with, you know, if you don't like what your parents tell you to do, then get the hell out of the house. But it used to be, don't listen to your parents, you know, just do what you want to do. You know, and I tell parents who complain about their kids being home, kick them the hell out. I've been on stages all around the country giving that message. When people say, oh, what do you do when your kid won't leave us? I go, throw them out. Tell them to get 4 friends together and go rent a place. I mean, so I just think that kids have to learn by experience. We have to allow them to do that. Look, it's very hard as a parent to let kids make mistakes that we know are mistakes. I mean, no doubt about it. This isn't a mistake like, oh, you shouldn't start your own business and the kid becomes successful. I'm talking about the things that we know don't work. But there's only so much we can do. And I think the harder we press, the more pushback we get. And, millennials are aging out right now. So I think they're a lost cause. I think we have to start looking at Gen Z and younger as far as things like that. But, again, I think we lead by example. I think that we look, when my daughter was 2 years old, I used to talk to her. And my ex-mother-in-law used to get crazy with me. You just tell a kid what to do. You don't sit there and have a conversation. And I had this amazing relationship that, sure, I knew my daughter wasn't grasping at all, but she was getting it. And she learned about being nice and being good to people. And the example, as you said, and we also learn a lot about it in the way we treat our kids. So I've always tried very hard to talk to my children, not to yell at my children, not to rant at my children, not to lecture them. Because, again, I know that I don't like, even today when we get off this call and Abe or Bruce call me up to lecture me about something. I much prefer when they say, hey, we'd love to talk to you about this. What do you think? And then you get into a back and forth. And I think back to what we're doing here, this whole series is about engagement. It's about opening up the floor for conversations.
Perfect. By the way, so it's a good segue into my last question. What are these key takeaways? I know you probably just mentioned a couple of them. What are the 3 key takeaways that you would like people to get from your authored books, from your podcast, from your presentations?
Well, okay. So first, I'm going to do something that I'm going to go off script for you a little bit, because it was something that you had fed to me, and I know we're running short on time, but I did want to get into a little bit of something that we talked about before we started the show about, advice you give to your younger self. So, which is a little bit different than my takeaways, because I've really thought about this a lot. And I'd like to share it. So first, I'd say, be careful about looking back too much. It's a rabbit hole. Learn from your mistakes, but try not to second guess yourself too much. Surround yourself with friends you trust. This is so important. I always tell my daughters there's all kinds of friends, and they'd say, Daddy, you have so many friends. And I'd explain to them, it's not because I'm the nicest guy in the world. It's because I work hard at it, because I reach out to them, because I do for them. I do for them without anything expected in return. But more importantly, I have different levels of friendship. So I don't give up friends when they prove themselves not to be as good a friend as another. I have friends, I have acquaintances, I have business friends. And then I have those people that are your best friends. And then those people that will never leave your side. And you're going to learn that as you go. Keep these people close. Some friends will be there for just when you need someone to listen to or offer comfort. Some will be there when you need advice. Associate with people who will drag you out of your comfort zone. My business partner is very much likely. He respects my comfort zones, but he drags me out of them, and I do the same for him. Model yourself after people you admire. And the word admire, I like words. To me, admire isn't someone that you necessarily look up to. It's not necessarily someone you envy. Admire is someone where you say, wow, I'd like to be like that. And usually for very strong reasons. So use them as your models. And then I'm going to tell you this right now. If you're younger people in this audience, if you're older, you are going to have to reinvent yourself at some point in your life. You're going to have to. Now, hopefully not like me, where I've done it probably 7 or 8 times. And I'm still doing it right now. But to reinvent yourself, first ask, why aren't you happy? And by the way, it can be that you just lost a job. It doesn't have to be a true unhappiness. But why are you unhappy? Why do I want to reinvent? And number 2, what are you passionate about? Can you make it a career? Don't listen to the people that tell you your career must be something you're passionate about. First of all, maybe at the beginning of your life you can focus that way, but even at the beginning of your life, sometimes you have parents you have to take care of, you have family you have to account for. There are things we all have to do because we have to do them. So your passion might be something separate from your career, and that's okay. And then once you make the decision to do it, just go for it. Stop worrying about it. Again, stop second guessing yourself. Stop looking back. Stop worrying about the perfect plan. Try things and get immediate feedback, which you can do easily these days to social media. And then the last thing on this thing about, my younger self is my biggest mistake, I believe, in life was giving up too soon and letting too much time go by before I tried something again and then moving on to the next. So, if it's something you love, if it's something you're passionate about, again, whether it's in your playtime or your business time, and you really believe it's something you could be successful at, give it more time. Don't just walk away. So I'm sorry if I took up a little bit too much time with that, but I just thought it was really important.
No, those are important points. I know there's a bit of a Q&A session here. We're going to get to that in just 2 seconds. But before we do,
I'm going to give you those takeaways. I wanted to give you the takeaways, right? Didn't you want those?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I thought, please.
No, Abe, don't cut off the takeaways.
Please do so.
So one of them is more of a dad mentor type takeaway versus a business takeaway, although they're all related to our lives, is that, there's a Dr. Seuss quote I always said to my daughters: be who you are and say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter and those who matter don't mind. And I think it's so important to be you. Again, that doesn't mean insulting people. That doesn't mean always saying, when I say what you think, it doesn't mean necessarily being rude or being unprofessional, but be you. It's just so important. So that's my overall kind of dad mentor thing. The 3 things I'd like to leave you with, and I might have mentioned them here, I might have not. One of them is that relationships are like muscle tissue. The more you engage them, the stronger and more valuable they become. Just like when you lift weights or you work out, you get better at relationships, and the ones you have get better. Number 2 is a network gives you reach, but a community gives you power. Build community. I always thought of myself as a networker. Everywhere I went, every job, every camp, every college, every school, I always left with at least 1 or 2 really close to your friends that have remained lifelong friends. But what I found out, and people noticed this, they said to me, you're not just a networker, you're a community. I bring all my friends together, and I'm a community builder. And a community gives you strength. Community has power. And especially in this environment with what we're talking about here and what this whole series is about, community is so important. So just remember that. Communities give you power. And then the last thing on that front is that, I said this earlier, a brand is what your person or a business does. A reputation is what people remember and share. So the actions you take will result in the way people talk about you. And then one last note, and we also mentioned this earlier, you mentioned my Be Good to People, and I said this a little bit, but Be Good to People is a part of my life. And wearing these t-shirts, I had the company back when they didn't have them make me buttons, because when I couldn't wear I found that whenever I travel, I wear something that says Be Good to People. And it's changed the way I get treated by the TSA know me. They call me the Be Good to People guy. This is not my brand. I just adopted the thing. But what I want to share, because there's been some confusion about this, is that Be Good to People is not just about being kind and nice. Being good to people is about looking out for those who can't look out for themselves. It's about fighting hatred in the world. It's about helping do good when you think good is important. And again, pushing down on all these things that have been happening with misinformation and hatred. It's so important. And the same thing for companies. Yes, you'll see me rip a company apart on social media sometimes, but 99% of the time, there's positive feedback in there, and there's an offer. Reach out to me. I will tell you my opinion about how you can make it better. And that goes to the way we opened up this whole story.
Perfect. What I wanted to kind of ask you, Ted, is have you ever done a TED Talk, and would you consider doing one?
All my talks are TED Talks.
A TED Talk?
Absolutely.
I just want to be clear about that. At one time, I started a video series called TED Talks. And I have never done an official TED Talk. And I would do one, perhaps. Unfortunately, I have never been asked to do one for the official company TED. I've been asked to do a lot of TEDx talks. And I've also learned a lot of the TEDx organizations, I hate to say this, but they hustle you with courses you have to take and things you have to do to prepare. And I don't mind preparing, but I'm not going to pay you for it.
Sure.
So that's been a little bit of a roadblock to it. I almost did a TED Talk through IBM once, and it did not happen when I was working with them. But yeah, I think highly of the medium, and I love the way they condense the conversation into a very directed message. So I've used some of the books that train TED Talkers for some of my speaking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Certainly not today, because I went on and on. But
perfect. Bruce.
Yeah. Abe, I'm taking over
Please, please.
So back down. So, Abe, Abe, thanks so much, and it's been such an inspiration and an education for me. Ted, Theodore, what are you doing to me? So Ted, there is, before what you said here and what we've heard on other events, you have mentioned that you keep your mobile next to you, and that it's not to check something, but it's when something comes to your mind, you'll tweet it out, right? I think, from what I heard from you, and somebody on listening feels the same way, that it almost sounds counterintuitive the way you use Twitter, right? That people that you're saying Twitter you use is to get something out there, kind of gets into the conversation quick, and maybe it doesn't become such an issue. But I think we see people that careers have been taken down on Twitter posts. So what is your take? Can you communicate too much on Twitter?
Of course you can, but let me tell you why people's careers are taken down on Twitter. And this has to do with all social media. They don't pay attention to what they're writing. I don't broadcast. I use it to broadcast, but I don't have a broadcast mindset. I watch every tweet I send. I look for immediate reactions. I jump in and resolve if there are issues. If I write something that is insulting to somebody or was taken the wrong way, I correct it. I explain it. If I wrote something and it was meant to be insulting, and somebody says it's insulting, I will expand on why I said something like that. So I feel that most of the careers that have come down, two things have happened. They've tweeted and they tweeted, they put it down, and they go away. They come back 2 hours later, and I was going to say something, but I'll say a storm has arisen, and they weren't there to manage it. So I am always there to manage what I put on social media. That's number one. Number two is I also know when to stop. A lot of these people whose careers go away, it's just like the person you get into an argument with at a bar or on the street or in the car. All you meant to say was, hey man, like that was my spot. You didn't expect it to accelerate into fisticuffs. But what happens is very often it's our own fault. Like, okay, look, I've learned a lot in my life. I can see when something's going somewhere I don't want it to go. I like to say that I can walk into a room and I can raise the temperature, I can lower the temperature at will, in general, of course, because I know what to do. So the reason people kill their careers or get things that really embarrass their companies is because they don't pay attention to their writing. They don't set up initial guardrails for themselves. They don't do what I said like you, is that I stop for a second. And back to what I do at night, first of all, let's clarify something. My phone is initially on because my daughters might reach out to me. And because I've gone through this whole alienation thing and I've had to fight to keep my daughters in my life, any moment they reach out, I want to be there. Even if it's my daughter texted me at 2 o'clock in the morning the other night for a code for Xfinity. I'm like, do you know it's 2 o'clock in the morning? You know what she wrote back to me? Well, you're up, aren't you?
You're the best dad ever, Ted. The best dad ever.
Like, I am now. But what I do is, the reason I write things here instead of writing them down is because I get immediate feedback. Again, I think of a thought. I don't put out controversial things in the middle of the night, again, because I want to be there to see the results. But if I come up with, a brand is what a business does or something like that, or any of the other things I think about, or, you should think of charitable giving as giving through the organization, not giving to the organization. I'll write that out in the middle of the night because then by the time I wake up, I've already got feedback. I already know what I thought about. Does it have value or not? So that's the whole purpose behind that.
Thank you so much. So I know that you are a fan of Dale Carnegie, and that I think you've mentioned here about looking at the people digitally, and I think you give attribution and you acknowledge how important he's been in his book. His book is to How to Win Friends and Influence People. But it seems to me, one of the things that Dale Carnegie got kind of criticized for was the appearance of caring, right? He emphasized the appearance of caring and being interested in somebody else. And it seems to me what you are espousing and your philosophy is being empathetic, the empathy of caring for people and caring about the relationship.
No, absolutely. So let me just clarify something. Did you say he got criticized for caring or for not caring?
For advocating the appearance of caring.
Well, truth be told, I don't know. I guess it's how you read into it. So I have Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People on every device. I have a original version that Jeremy Waite, who works for IBM now, who used to work for Adobe, who's written a bunch of books, got me an original copy because he heard me talk about it on stage so much. So I think it's how you read into it. I think what he was saying is if you show a true interest in people, it will come back to you. That's at least the way I take it. So
Okay.
I think caring is so important. I think that people can feel it. They can feel when you just ask the questions and then 2 seconds later you're onto the sales, or you're not really listening. It goes back to what I said, looking people in the eye, especially when you're with them, letting them know you're actually listening. All of you guys must have learned this sometime in your career. Repeat back something somebody said to you so that they know that you're paying attention.
Yes.
You know, these are all very important things. And look, I was going to use one of Dale Carnegie's quotes in my closing, but I wanted to shorten it a little bit. But one of the things I love about Dale Carnegie is he has this great line, and I'm not going to get it exactly correct because it's a long quote, but it's not what you have or what you do or where you are that makes you happy. It's what you think about. And I think we've all learned this, and when we start going down rabbit holes of our past or things that we're doing or mistakes we made, it's it's why thinking positive is so important. Now, that doesn't mean blanketing out everything. I am not that guy at all. I mean, I've gone through struggles in my life, and I think about them and I do them. But I also know that when I'm doing that, I've got to get out of that. That's also why I'm feeling badly. And then you start thinking about more positive things. And there's another quote that's very near and dear to me by Joan Baez, one of my favorite balladeers from the 60s.
Yeah, we know what she is.
That action is the antidote to despair.
Oh, I love it. Love it.
And for me, it's when I wake up depressed in the morning, it's all about getting started. It's all about, if I wake up thinking about my daughters or thinking about something that's not happening, it's a matter of starting something. And by the way, when I say action, it doesn't have to be going for a run or riding your bike. It can just be simply the act of making coffee, but doing something that gets you starting involved and gets you thinking about things that are on a more positive sense of how can I fix this instead of the problem I'm in. As they like to say, every problem is an opportunity.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank our Ted Rubin. You have been just an education and an inspiration. Thank you for all your time, and frankly for your candor. I think that you bring a candor to the discussion that is a little bit rare in my opinion. So thank you very much for spending time with us